Hi everyone, it's David from Power here. Welcome to another episode of Invest Power Stories today. So continuing from last time where I explained a little bit about investing interstate, I hope that everyone is now get a bit more idea on why I chose looking at interstate. Now, just to recap a couple of things, it was purely based on the numbers, and that's one reason why I was essentially lead me to Brisbane, and I'll explain a little bit more today about why Brisbane. And that was fundamentally, the numbers just led me to where I think the investment's going to make sense. So that's why I want to touch on a little bit in terms of once I defined Brisbane as the next city to do my due diligence on, what other steps did I do from that point onwards, okay? So I guess you might be asking, why Brisbane? Okay, well, a couple of reasons there really. One is from property cycle perspective. Brisbane usually booms after Sydney and Melbourne has done its course. So when I'm looking at back in 2015, Sydney is actually doing a really, really good run. Melbourne is also following closely behind. And based on historical trends, and you can go as far as back to the 50s, 1950s, for example, it essentially goes back that, about 1 or 2 years after Sydney and Melbourne booms, then that's when Brisbane also follows. So on that basis, it's by analyzing the past trend and then making a logical due diligence and research at that point in time, and especially when you look at the actual property prices at Brisbane around that time. In comparison with Sydney and Melbourne, it is so cheap in comparison. Not to mention about the competition on the ground, there's not that much at all. So the other thing about Brisbane is population. Brisbane is actually the third biggest capital city with population in Australia. It accounts for about 2.6 million of number of people, and also it's about 20% of the overall Australia population. So as you can see that in that perspective, where there is population, there will be employment, and as such there will be potential in terms of driving housing demand. So it comes back to the fundamentals of supply and demand. If the population continues to go up like how Sydney and Melbourne does, then essentially that's why you want to be able to get into the capital city earlier rather than later. So that's another reason why I picked Brisbane at that point in time, is due to its population and the future potential growth in terms of its population, as well as the infrastructure that's been put into place as well. And because the price point of Brisbane is right in comparison with Sydney and Melbourne, I should say right, that means essentially the yield return is a lot higher. So to give you an example, back in 2015 when I was looking around Brisbane, my initial budget was around $300,000, and I was looking around Sunnybank in a specific suburb called Runcorn, right next to Sunnybank, and I was looking at townhouses. Because at that time, Sunnybank is already quite expensive in terms of houses. For those of you that doesn't know Sunnybank, it's like the Asian hub of Brisbane. Lots of good food, plenty of units around that place now. Back in 2015, that didn't happen. There's all just single level shop. But last year when I went back, they started building high rises. So that gives you a bit of idea on how much demand there is in Sunnybank itself. So I was specifically looking at Runcorn, which is the suburb that's next to Sunnybank. Looking at using the ugly duckling suburb effect. I was actually looking around the suburbs around Sunnybank, and that's why I got my eyes on Runcorn. And I noticed that the townhouses around Runcorn were selling around high 200s, and there's still rents around 350, for example. So the rental return is really good. Nowhere you can get that in Sydney. So that was my first impression. The number looks so good. It was like 6.5% type of yield, and it just blew me away at that time. Even after I do my cash flow calculator analysis, the numbers are still relatively neutral, positive. So I think to myself, this is not going to be a bad investment. And guess what the next thing is? I basically jump on the plane, book the ticket, jump on the plane and go and see the property itself. So I booked a weekend, went there, check out Runcorn, check out the townhouses. I had a couple marked down on Saturday, so I basically go around the inspections, attended as many as I could, speak to the agents, get a feel of what it's like, and then I realized there are so much oversupply of townhouses in Runcorn. That is why, one, the price is cheap because there's so much supply over demand, and two, you know, the rent, the estimated or the advertised rent is probably a lot higher than what people can actually get. Because, you know, as you can imagine from rental perspective, just like currently in Sydney, if you've got 5 properties to choose from, then certainly you've got a lot of options, right? That's what happened then in Runcorn with townhouses. Whereas now it's happening in Sydney, so that's why Sydney's rent is also dropping in that perspective. So after a bit closer due diligence on the ground, and also another thing that I noticed when I was on the ground during inspection is there's not that many people checking out the townhouses in Runcorn. So I was a bit, I was scratching my head. I was like, how come there's no one? There's really only the sales agent and myself. And he seems pretty bored, and you know, like it just doesn't seem like the same as Sydney when it was going crazy, booming like crazy at that time where people were lining up. So that again sort of gave me a bit of hunch. You kind of go, oh, okay, well, is this really something that I should be looking at? Because if it's so good, then why isn't people snatching it up so quickly? Okay, so that's another thing that basically sparked in the back of my mind to say, probably need to look at more due diligence on this.